You're not lazy. You're not broken. And you're definitely not incapable. You've just been taught to chase the wrong things for the wrong reasons. What most people call laziness is usually just a deep lack of meaning. Not a flaw in your discipline, but a fracture in your connection to purpose. We live in a world obsessed with productivity. Hustle harder. Wake up at 5 a.m. Take cold showers. Use 5 different apps to organize your to-do list. Everywhere you look, there's a new system or hack promising to fix your motivation problem. But what if it's not about systems? What if it's about soul? You don't need more hustle. You need more truth. Because real motivation, the kind that sustains you, doesn't come from guilt, fear, or comparison. It doesn't come from scrolling past someone else's perfect morning routine and trying to copy it. That's borrowed discipline. And it burns out fast. Real motivation is quiet. It doesn't yell at you. It pulls you. It whispers through your curiosity, your longing, your restlessness. And if you ignore it for too long, it shows up as depression, apathy, or that persistent feeling of, what's the point? You're not unmotivated. You're emotionally starved. You're tired of doing things that don't actually matter to you, of performing for a life that doesn't feel like your own. And so your mind says, we need to get our life together. But your heart quietly mutters, I don't care anymore. That's not a discipline problem. That's a misalignment. When you're disconnected from your values, no amount of grind can give you energy. You can wake up early, journal, and check off 10 tasks by noon and still feel empty. Because energy doesn't come from doing more. It comes from doing the right things, the ones that resonate, the ones that feel like you. Somewhere along the way, you stopped asking what matters to you. Maybe you were too busy surviving, or trying to fit in, or doing what your parents, school, or society said was the right path. You got good at playing the game, but somewhere inside, you lost the thread of why you were playing in the first place. And without that why, everything feels heavy. You start to need external pressure just to move. Deadlines, fear of failure, pressure to perform. That becomes your fuel. But that's borrowed fire. And eventually it runs out. When you're truly connected to what matters, motivation stops being a fight. You don't need to hype yourself up every morning. You're pulled by something deeper, a vision, a value, a purpose. The work might still be hard, but it feels right. There's friction, but there's no confusion. Think about kids. When they're immersed in something they love, you don't need to bribe them or threaten them to keep going. They'll lose track of time. Skip meals, forget to sleep. Not because they're disciplined, but because they're engaged. That's what adult motivation often lacks: engagement with the soul. You can only grind through so many soulless goals before you start to burn out, check out, or collapse entirely. And ironically, the more disconnected you are from meaning, the more you try to compensate with systems, apps, and routines, when what you really need is a deeper question. What do I actually care about? That question is terrifying, because it might take you in a direction your life isn't set up for. It might mean walking away from what's comfortable. But here's the truth. No amount of external productivity will ever fill the void that comes from internal disconnection. The hardest part isn't working hard. It's getting honest about what excites you. Honest about what drains you. Honest about the difference between the life you're building and the one your heart is quietly begging you to live. The modern world has taught you to chase stimulation instead of meaning, dopamine instead of depth. You scroll endlessly, bounce between tabs, seek quick wins, not because you're lazy, but because your nervous system's desperate to feel something. And that something is easier to find in short hits of novelty than in the long climb of meaningful pursuit. But here's the trap. The more you rely on dopamine, the more distant meaning becomes. Dopamine demands speed. Meaning requires stillness. Dopamine rewards surface-level wins. Meaning asks you to go deeper, into your pain, your truth, your values. You've been conditioned to think motivation looks like energy and excitement. But often, real motivation begins as grief. It starts when you realize how long you've ignored yourself. When you wake up and see how much of your time has gone to chasing goals that aren't yours. It hurts, but that hurt is honest. And from it, something real can grow. You don't need to become more productive. You need to become more present with yourself. Because when you finally stop numbing out and tune in, your real desires begin to emerge. And they might not look flashy. They might not impress people, but they'll move you. And that's what matters. We often think the answer is to push harder, wake up earlier, block distractions, grind. But what if the answer is actually to pause, to sit with yourself, to feel what you've been avoiding, to ask, if I didn't have to prove anything to anyone, what would I do with this day, this year, this life? You can't guilt yourself into greatness. You can't shame yourself into clarity. But you can reconnect with your values, your curiosity, your intuition. And once you do, motivation stops being a problem. Because now, it's not about forcing movement. It's about following direction. Not all effort is equal. There's a huge difference between pushing yourself towards something empty and being pulled towards something true. One drains you. The other changes your life. Most people aren't failing because they lack discipline. They're failing because they're trying to force themselves to care about things they secretly don't believe in. When your goals are disconnected from your identity, no amount of effort can sustain them. You'll always sabotage, always procrastinate, always burn out. But here's what no one tells you. Procrastination isn't laziness. It's inner resistance. Your subconscious trying to tell you, this isn't aligned. Maybe the job you're trying to excel in doesn't excite you. Maybe the relationship you're in is draining your spirit. Maybe the version of success you're chasing is just what you think will finally make you feel worthy. You can't override that misalignment with a better planner or stronger willpower. That's like trying to swim upstream in a river that's flowing the other way. Sure, you can push for a while, but eventually your arms give out. Real motivation flows when your direction matches your depth. When you pursue what lights you up, not just what looks good on paper. And sometimes reconnecting with that truth means letting go of things that once made sense, or people who once fit. This is scary, especially if you've built a life around someone else's expectations. But you can't live a meaningful life if you're constantly outsourcing your meaning. You have to ask the harder questions. Why am I doing this? Who am I trying to impress? What part of me am I betraying to keep this going? These aren't comfortable questions, but they are clarifying. Because the real reason you can't stay motivated might just be this. Your soul is starving, not for more effort, not for more hacks, but for truth, for depth, for a direction that feels like home. And once you start walking toward that, even if you're afraid, something amazing happens. The energy comes back, not all at once, but slowly. Like blood returning to a limb that had fallen asleep. That's not discipline. That's alignment. That's remembering. The final truth is this. Your life isn't waiting on the perfect routine or the ultimate productivity hack. It's waiting on you, the real you. The one buried under all the performance, the pressure, the pretending, and reconnecting with that version of yourself isn't a one-time insight. It's a daily practice. You have to listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the quieter voice within. This voice often won't sound confident. It might not have a 5-year plan. It may only speak in feelings, a pull, a resistance, a deep yes, or a quiet no. But this voice is the compass you've been missing. The longer you ignore it, the more life will feel dull, directionless, even meaningless, no matter how productive you are. Because there is no productivity without purpose. There is only movement without meaning. You need to stop asking, how can I get more done? And start asking, what's actually worth doing? When you shift from performance to purpose, everything changes. You're no longer chasing dopamine spikes. You're following depth. You're not trying to impress strangers online. You're living a life that impresses you. And the wild thing? That's when motivation returns. Not as a surge of hype, but as a steady fire. A force that doesn't burn out, because it's not coming from ego. It's coming from essence. So if you've been feeling lost, unmotivated, even broken, I want to tell you, you're not lazy. You're not weak. You're just disconnected. And reconnecting won't happen overnight, but it will happen the moment you decide to stop numbing out and start tuning in. Every time you ignore what matters to you, life becomes a little heavier. And every time you move toward what matters, even just a little, life begins to open back up. So don't ask for motivation. Ask for meaning. And then listen for the answer that's already been waiting inside you. Because when you finally choose the path that feels right, not just the one that looks right, you won't have to force yourself to move anymore. You'll want to.